Okay, picture this. January 3rd, 2026. Under the cover of darkness, U.S. Special Forces are dropping into Caracas, Venezuela. And their target? It's the sitting head of state. Now this single operation, it did way more than just make headlines. It signaled a huge shift in American foreign policy. A bold, new playbook that people are already calling the Dunroe Doctrine. The mission was codenamed Operation Absolute Resolve, and wow, was it fast. U.S. forces captured President Nicolas Maduro, and he was quickly flown to the United States to face charges of narco-terrorism. An operation like this, actually capturing a sovereign leader, is something the world hasn't really seen in decades. You can bet it sent some serious shockwaves across the globe.
So this all raises two really big questions. First, why? What was the thinking behind a move this risky? And second, what does this mean for the future of, well, everything? The White House says the answer lies in dusting off and, let's say, reimagining a policy that's been around for 200 years.
To really get what's happening in 2026, we've got to rewind the clock, all the way back to 1823. Because this new doctrine, it's a much more aggressive version of one of the oldest ideas in American foreign policy.
So back in 1823, you had the Munroe Doctrine. It basically drew a line in the sand, telling European powers to stay out of the Western Hemisphere. No more colonization, no more meddling. And for the next century, that doctrine was used to justify a whole bunch of U.S. military actions in Latin America. Fast forward to today, and the Trump administration has basically given this old idea a 21st century upgrade.
And here is the absolute key difference. The original Munroe Doctrine was, at its heart, defensive. It was all about keeping outside powers from messing around in the Americas. But the Dunroe Doctrine, it's offensive. It claims the U.S. has the right to step in and remove governments or influences inside the hemisphere that it decides are a threat.
This statement from the State Department really says it all, doesn't it? The language is so direct, so possessive. It frames the Americas not just as a place the U.S. is interested in, but as its own domain, where it gets the final say on security.
So, why Venezuela? What made the U.S. decide to unleash this new doctrine there specifically? Well, if you look at the official statements and what analysts are saying, it all boils down to a mix of economics, global strategy, and setting a powerful new example.
We can really break it down into three main goals. First, get control over some very valuable resources. Second, push back against global competitors who are getting a little too comfortable in the region. And third, send a clear message for the future.
Let's start with the money. It's no secret. Venezuela is sitting on the world's largest proven oil reserves. That's a huge deal. And right after the raid, President Trump announced that U.S. companies would be heading in to manage and rebuild Venezuela's oil industry. A move like that could give Washington a massive amount of control over the global energy market. The second reason was pure geopolitics. For years, U.S. rivals, we're talking China, Russia, and Iran, had been building up their economic and military relationships with Venezuela. So this operation was a direct challenge to them. It was Washington pretty much saying, we're cleaning house on our home turf.
And finally, it was all about setting a new precedent. The U.S. went in alone on this. No green light from Congress, no mandate from the United Nations. By doing that, they showed the world they're willing to put their own security interests above long-standing international rules. You know, like the one that says you don't just go and grab another country's leader. It was a message, and it was a loud one.
As you can probably guess, a move this big, this bold, did not go unnoticed. The reaction from around the world was instant, it was intense, and people were, well, they were definitely not all on the same page.
Just look at these numbers. The international community was overwhelmingly critical. This chart tells a pretty clear story. Only a tiny slice of countries actually supported the raid. Almost everyone else either flat out condemned it or expressed really serious concerns about what it could mean for international law.
And if we get specific, the UN Secretary General called it deeply alarming. China and Russia teamed up to call it hegemonic. And crucially, a lot of major Latin American countries like Brazil and Mexico were against it, worried it would just create more instability in their own neighborhood. And Venezuela's allies, like Cuba, they called it state terrorism.
And things were just as divided back home in the United States. Supporters of the president were cheering it on as this bold move to restore American strength. But on the other side, you had a huge group of critics, Democrats and even some Republicans, calling it an illegal act of war and a throwback to the bad old days of regime change policy.
This quote from Senator Bernie Sanders really sums up how the opposition felt. He argued this wasn't some new, brilliant strategy. It was just a return to a long and, frankly, very troubled history of U.S. intervention in Latin America.
So the Dunroe Doctrine is no longer just a theory. It's been put into action. And the big question that's now hanging over the entire world is, what does this mean for the future? You see, a lot of analysts don't think this operation was just about Venezuela. They see it as a proof of concept, a demonstration of what the U.S. is now willing to do. And that has kicked off a ton of speculation about where this doctrine could be pointed next.
Reports have been circling about renewed White House interest in Greenland for its strategic value in the Arctic. President Trump has also said publicly that Cuba is ready to fall, and he's even threatened Colombia's government. There's even been talk about potential operations in Mexico to go after drug cartels. All of these are now seen as possible new tests for this doctrine.
But the bigger picture here, what a lot of foreign policy experts are really worried about, is a fundamental shift in how the world works. They're warning that actions like this could start to tear down what's called the rules-based international order. You know, that whole system of laws and treaties that has, for the most part, kept things from flying completely off the rails since World War II.
And this analysis really hits the nail on the head. The main worry is that we could be moving from a system where rules and diplomacy matter to one where the only thing that matters is raw power. The fear is that if the U.S. does this, what stops other major powers from doing the same in their own neighborhoods? It could lead to a much more chaotic and unpredictable world.
So, to put it simply, the Dunroe Doctrine is a clear, powerful statement of American dominance in the Western Hemisphere. Will it actually make the region more secure, or will it just spark more global conflict? That is the question for this new era. So what do you want us to break down next? Let us know in the comments.